Hello and welcome to the Crimson Misery Podcast, episode 22. My name is Will Rainbolt. I hope you all are doing well. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. If you are listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, consider rating the show 5 stars. If you are listening on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe down below. You can also email the pod at crimsonmiserypod@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for the show, any teams or players you want me to talk about, any suggestions in general. So, with that being said, we have a little bit to get into today. I wanted to do something a little fun-ish, I suppose, in talking about coaches that are on the hot seat, especially on the men's college basketball side, because on the women's side, I'm just not as, in touch with a lot of head coaching rumors, who's going where and what have you. So this will mostly be on the men's side, but I will get into some women's basketball here later in the pod. That being said, I do not have a ton to say about the Indiana USC women's basketball game on Sunday. It really wasn't that much of a surprise to me seeing Juju Watkins take over and then Indiana just turning it over on multiple occasions let USC back in the game. Indiana had like a 13-point lead in it was either the late first quarter or early second quarter, and they could not hold on. So USC ends up winning that one. And now Purdue gets to face the wrath of Juju Watkins, Kiki Uriafen, Talia Van Ohofen, and company. So yeah, just not a ton to say there. Aside from that, um, yeah, UCLA beat Baylor. They are still undefeated. Texas ended up beating Maryland, crushing Maryland, 89 to 51. This was in the Coretta Scott King Classic for MLK Day, and so a couple of really, really good games, or good teams playing in games because I mean, definitely with the Texas Maryland game, that was just a rout. So Maryland may not be as good as we thought they were, especially, you know, playing against a Texas team that you would think they would play decently well against. But no, Madison Booker had 28 points to lead Texas. So Texas is still really good, and they are definitely going to be um, near the top of the SEC by the time this season comes to an end. So TCU's still in action. They are 19-1 on the year. Again, I've talked about Haley Van Lith looking a lot better now that she's away from LSU, and yeah, they're going to be playing Oklahoma State. So we'll see if that ends up holding up. And then Minnesota, Michigan is also tonight, as well as Penn State, Michigan State. So that's sort of the women's basketball schedule for today, later in the day. And then on the men's side, we have quite a bit to get into. Um, I didn't, I had a bit of I had some other um, priorities, so I wasn't able to catch some of the matchups, but I did see the scores, did catch a lot of highlight earlier on Tuesday. So bear with me if I don't have like a ton to say about a lot of these games, but I still definitely want to at least talk about it. We had a couple teams put up 100 or more points, one of which is Alabama, which is not a surprise at all. They are rolling after they lost to Ole Miss at home, where they did not look like themselves. These last two games, they have looked much better. One of them was at Kentucky, which was, a great win for them, of course. And then last night they defeated Vanderbilt, who is pretty good, 15-4, 3-3 overall. But Alabama being at home, being the number 4 team in the country, they absolutely rolled over the Commodores, 103 to 87. Again, defense has always been kind of a question mark for them, but they they just still they are still really good. So Mohamed Diabate had 22, Mark Sears had 21, um, Aiden Holloway had 22 as well. Again, when you have guys like Chris Youngblood and Holloway and Diabate coming off the bench, that's a really scary team. Um, Combined with their really good starting five, I mean, Alabama is going to be a problem come tournament time. So they are still really, really good. And Vanderbilt, I mean, Jason Edwards going 8 for 20 didn't help, obviously, but he was getting a lot of shots because of the pace Alabama plays at. He had 21, and then Tyler Nickel and Devin McLaughlin had 10. Um, so yeah, Tyler Nickel at 19. So yeah, Alabama still really good. And then Iowa State coming off the loss at West Virginia, end up defeating Central Florida 108 to 83. Good God. Joshua Jefferson had 30 points. Um, Keshawn Gilbert had 21. Curtis Jones, who has been starting, I think, the last three games, had 19. So he's been starting. He hasn't been coming off the bench. So that is an interesting move from TJ Otzelberger, um, starting him when he's the Big 12 Sixth Man of the Year front runner. Um, but I mean, it's been working for the most part, aside from the loss, at West Virginia. But um, yeah, I mean they just really wrecked Central Florida. And I mean I know it's at home, but UCF just did not have an answer. They've been really inconsistent, so Iowa State gets the win there. Marquette bounced back after losing to Xavier at home. They end up uh, going on the road, beating a pretty bad Seton Hall team, 76 to 59. Cam Jones had 19 in that one, and Seton Hall just continues to not look very good. So they I've talked about it since the beginning of the podcast. This is a team that has, the potential to be like a 20 plus loss team, and they are well on their way to doing that. So again, for Marquette, if they want to be near the top of the Big East, like they need to win these games. Um, and I'll get to another Big East team here in a second because oh boy. But yeah, Tennessee defeated Mississippi State. Mississippi State scored 16 points in the first quarter. Or in first quarter. First, I'm like so focused on women's basketball. First half. So Josh Hubbard had 14 points, but again, Mississippi State has been pretty inconsistent so far in SEC play. And then Chaz Lanier, I think, is finally starting to get over the hump a little bit with his shooting not being as good in recent games. But he had 23 points, 5 of 12 from three. Um, as long as and I mean Jordan Gainey didn't have a great shooting night, but if those guys can continue to produce for Tennessee, they're going to be pretty difficult to beat. So, yeah, Tennessee, even though they've lost twice, this is a game they definitely needed to have at home against a ranked opponent, and they got it. So, another very quality win for Tennessee, and then for Mississippi State, it's just another instance of the SEC being really good, and they're going to continue to have games like this if they don't step up. I mean, they had it against Kentucky. They beat, I think they also who did they also lose to? Because I'm thinking of Georgia beating Oklahoma. I don't remember. Yeah, at Auburn. So I mean, their three losses are in the SEC are to three of the best teams in the conference. So I'm not too worried about them yet. They get a game against South Carolina. If they don't beat South Carolina, even though it's on the road, then I would potentially start to raise alarm bells because your games after that are against Alabama, Missouri, who I'll talk about in a second, at Georgia, and then Florida. So it's a grind. This conference is a meat grinder. So definitely want to watch out for that if you're Mississippi State. But again, that's the thing with the SEC is that Mississippi State would be like top two or three in like any other conference. They're 22nd in Ken Palm. So again, nothing to really, be too worried about. But again, if they start to lose games in the SEC that you need to win in order to stay afloat, then the alarm bells are definitely going to be going off for a lot of fans there. So now this is a result that was really surprising. Ohio State goes on the road into Mackey Arena and beats Purdue 73 to 70. Purdue had a 16-point lead and ended up losing this one after Ohio State really, I think they went on a 20 to 2 run. Um, to take the lead for good. They just really Purdue, as much as they tried to come back, really couldn't. Um, yeah, so it was uh really hot shooting too by Ohio State. I think they made like 7 or 8 threes in the second half to get them back into that one. And then Purdue, just overall a lot of question marks defensively. Um, not I wouldn't want to say like taking Ohio State seriously, especially after Ohio State lost at home to a right now confusing Indiana team. But this is a big win for Jake Diebler and Ohio State. Um, Micah Parrish played really, really well in this one, 22 points, 6 of 8 from three. So John Mobley, who was really good against Indiana, cooled off, and then Micah Parrish was like, "Okay, well, I'll take over now." That was even without a fantastic performance from Bruce Thornton, only 11 points, but 3 of 6 from three. Those threes counted for sure, and yeah, Trey Kaufman ran out a really good game, but again, when Braden Smith doesn't play well, Purdue is in trouble. Um, I didn't get to see a ton of action. Like I saw a lot of highlights in this one, but apparently from what I was seeing on Twitter, the referees, especially Jeffrey Anderson, the high knees referee, was really they weren't all that good. Jeffrey Anderson has had a really tough couple of days from what I've seen. Um, I don't know. I can't really say too much about that because I didn't watch the game live. But again, I think if you're Purdue, you shouldn't put yourself in that situation to lose to this Ohio State team at home. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is a big win. I mean, Jakari Harris for Purdue had a couple big shots late. I know that, but yeah, when it's just that thing where when Braden Smith doesn't play well, the offense just doesn't really get into a groove. Especially when you go 3 of 14 from the floor. So I know he had 8 assists, but that's still like um against a team like Ohio State, you need to put them away. And that did not happen. And Purdue paid the price. So they end up losing this one after beating Oregon on the road. So that very confusing result. But that's college basketball for you. Any given night, any team on any day can beat anyone, I suppose. That's not really true, by the way. But um, anyway, so that was really, really weird to see. I thought Purdue would have easily won that one, but they did not did not end up doing that. Speaking of Oregon, they're so confusing. Everyone like watching them is always like Oregon just doesn't play well at home. They don't play well at home for some reason, and they had to Ralph's game for a while against Washington, former Pac-12 rival, now a Big Ten rival. Um, again, Washington's 10-9, 1-7 in the Big Ten. Um, yeah, they Oregon really was struggling in this one, and then finally in the second half they broke away, but it just doesn't. There's just something about this Oregon team that's really weird. and I don't get it. It's like they on the road they don't really seem to have these problems, but um, at home they're just very lethargic a lot of the time. I don't really understand their guards either because it just, especially with Shellstad, um, I don't. It's weird how much they are just the flow is not very good for Oregon. They don't really they turn it over way too much, especially when they're trying to dump it in the post, kick it back out. Their passes are always like really strange to me. Um, so that's something to really keep an eye on down the stretch for Oregon. And maybe they clean it up down the stretch, but if not, then they might be in trouble. Um, so I don't know. I don't really know what to make of this Oregon team. I know I said they would win the Big Ten tournament, but we shall see on that one. UCLA um, ends the Badgers' 7-game winning streak with a win at home, 85 to 83. UCLA is bouncing back. Um, they defeated Iowa recently, and then now they've defeated Wisconsin. And I know people were also crying about the refs in this game. Um, but I mean, Wisconsin, I mean, UCLA had two players foul out. So I don't exactly know uh, if all of that is warranted. I'm sure there were some bad calls because that's just Big Ten officiating. Um, but yeah, UCLA was down by like five, I think, at halftime, I want to say. Ye- Yeah, okay. So, but then UCLA really took over despite, John Tonji and John Blackwell being really good still. This Wisconsin team is still a dangerous one to play because of those two guys, especially. But UCLA ended up holding them off at home. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't. It's weird how this Wisconsin team just doesn't play as well defensively in the past. Um, yeah, 57th in defensive rating, which is not really Wisconsin's. Uh, it's always been a strength, especially under Bo Ryan. In the early years of Greg Gard, it just doesn't seem like this Wisconsin team is as good defensively. I mean, you can kind of say the same thing with Rutgers in a way, how they're not as good defensively, but at least Wisconsin has like familiar players and like a similar system. But I don't know, just the way they play is really their star talent, I think, is better than it was last year, of course. I know they had AJ Storr and Chucky Hepburn, but um, the style they play is always screaming to me like a first round upset, um, which we shall see what ends up happening. But with this current team, I don't I don't quite exactly know what to expect. Um, yeah, Ademara had 22 points to lead UCLA. I think Wisconsin, I mean, Wisconsin tried to come back near the end. I think it was a 1 point game, but then UCLA hit some free throws. Um, and then, yeah. So, yeah, good on UCLA beating Wisconsin and maybe like finally orchestrating a turnaround. Um, Wow. I mean, Louisville blowing out SMU on the road. I mean, Louisville and Wake Forest, I mean, Louisville's probably the second best team in the ACC, and then it's probably Clemson and Wake Forest at third, but obviously behind Duke. I'll get to North Carolina in a second. Um, Arizona State goes on the road and beats West Virginia after West Virginia beat Iowa State at home. This is definitely a letdown game for West Virginia. I've experienced that as an Indiana fan, and this is exactly what it was. So, yeah, this is a pretty big win for Arizona State. Bobby Hurley, not to be confused with his brother Danny Hurley at UConn, but this is a guy who I will speak about when I get to my my college coaches on the hot seat list because even with this win, he's still like right there. But I will get to that whenever I get through the games, the slate of games that happened. Texas beats Missouri at home. Texas needed this win. Missouri, after getting two really good wins last week against at Florida and then Arkansas, end up falling in this one. Tamar Bates had a fantastic poster um, against Texas, but yeah, they got the win. They held Missouri to just 53 points on offense. So Texas under Rodney Terry needed this kind of win. Um, Caleb Grill only had 6 points, didn't have a great shooting effort. Missouri really didn't have a good shooting night overall. 4 of 22 from three. Neither did Texas, but they made a few. There's a lot of fouls were called in this game too. So you had 27 free throw attempts from Missouri, 30 for Texas, and so but yeah, Arthur Kaluma had 14 points to lead the way. Trey Johnson had 12. And again, you're going to probably need better shooting nights to beat some of the better SEC teams. But and then Missouri's ranked 22nd, so they end up falling on the road. But you're going to have games like that in the SEC. So, but again, you can't really afford to have a ton of them in this conference. So, because you need to get better wins as well. Even though they have a win over Kansas, who was number one at the time, and at Florida, um, we'll see if that ends up continuing. Because I do like this Missouri team. I like the way they play, but I'm, skeptical that, especially after the Texas game, that it can be consistent, I suppose. But we'll see. It's not, I wouldn't be too concerned yet if I'm Missouri and if I'm Texas. It's a really good win to get kind of boosted up a little bit. And again, they needed it after starting 1-4 in the SEC. So good win for them. And then UConn barely scraped out a win against a bad Butler team at home, 80-78. And look, I get they're without Liam McNeely. I get that they still have a lot of problems. Um, Solo ball, dude is really good. I love solo ball. 23 points. Alex Caravan had a bit of a bounce back after the loss against Creighton, had 19 points. Shooting definitely a better in this one, but good God, defensively, this UConn team is a mess. This UConn team is so bad defensively. Um, yeah, 35th in Ken Palm overall, and they are eighth in offensive rating and 132nd in defensive rating overall. That's bad. That's pretty bad. So UConn has to fix a lot of that if they want to have a three-peat, because you can't allow a Butler team to score 78 points who is so bad. You can't allow that if you're UConn. And they did. They're lucky to have won this game. They should have won this game by 10 or more points. And the fact they didn't says, oh yeah, there's a lot of problems with this UConn team. Samson Johnson had actually a pretty decent bounce back. I say that considering he really hasn't been anything special this season. Um, a guy who like really people thought he was really going to step up after last season playing behind Donovan Clingan. But he's really like 7.9 points. I know he's not like the focal point of their offense, but that's still definitely he still definitely needs to step up. If guys like Hassan Diarra or Jalen Stewart don't have great games. Um, but I know Terrace Reed had a really good night off the bench. Um, but again, he was in foul trouble, and so there's just not a ton of room for error if you're UConn. You got lucky against Butler, but if UConn continues to play like this, against better competition. And I think who do they play at Xavier next? Yeah, they play Xavier. This is a Xavier team that took him into overtime. So part of me wants to say Xavier finally gets Sean Miller gets his guys rolling against UConn, but at the same time, I um I think UConn definitely will be woken up. I think Dan Hurley will definitely, if you're Dan Hurley, get under the skin of a lot of your guys and rile them up. So I think UConn will win this game actually at Xavier. I just feel that they're like I just feel like they will play better, but it is like which UConn team ends up showing up. If the team that showed up against Butler shows up against Xavier, I don't they lose. I don't think that's. But again, I think again Dan Hurley, as much as he can piss off a lot of people, um, he is just again so much um of his aura is just um very on the spectrumy. And again, as someone who is also potentially on the spectrum, I get it. But like he just has this temper and this kind of psychotic breakdown that he has seemingly every game that just make me ponder like, okay, this guy's not totally here mentally, but he is a good basketball coach. So he's won two national titles. He is definitely, look, narcissistic, psychotic, whatever you want to say about Dan Hurley. I just like it's kind of also entertaining in a way, um, how much of a crybaby he is, but he he has to get the guys going. Like he has to light a fire under them for Xavier, because if they don't, they lose. But part of me thinks they will, and part of me thinks Xavier just like I know they beat Marquette, um, so we shall see. But again, if they're not able to play well against teams like Xavier and DePaul, they have Marquette and St. John's coming up, who are at the top of the Big East that they need to end up beating. And then on top of that, they have to play Creighton again, who Creighton just beat them. So those are games that they definitely need to step up against, because if not, they might be in trouble, like genuinely, because they don't have eight. I mean, I know they have wins over Gonzaga and Baylor, and they beat Texas. They have some good wins this year, but this Big East does not have a ton of quality teams aside from St. John's and Marquette, and maybe Creighton's bouncing back a little bit, and a lot of the others are just kind of mediocre. Um, I mean, Georgetown's played a little bit better. Villanova's played a little bit better, but again, teams like Providence, who I thought was going to be way better, and I was wrong about that. Um, so yeah, UConn definitely needs to step up because if, again, as I said, and I will leave it at this, if the team that showed up in this game against Butler shows up against higher quality teams, they are they are screwed. So Dan Hurley needs to get them going, because otherwise they're not gonna they might be like playing for their tournament lives if this keeps up for them. So anyway, um, with that being said, let's move on to a little bit more to the Atlantic 10, because they were also in action tonight. VCU and George Mason both won. Um, VCU won at Rhode Island, and then George Mason won at St. Bonaventure. So George Mason, I gotta like again, this is a George Mason team that is 6-1 in the A10. Um, there's a very good chance that they are going to make the NCAA tournament and win the Atlantic 10 with the way they're playing. I know VCU's also up there, um, but they have really been playing well. So yeah, VCU is 5-1 now. George Mason 6-1. So again, St. Bonaventure also probably needed to get this win here, but losing by double digits at home to George Mason is not a great look. So Dayton goes on the road, beats Duquesne 82-62. St. Joseph's beats Davidson on the road 78-61. So a lot of road warrior games in the Atlantic 10 tonight. So yeah, Dayton really needed this one. St. Joseph's is 3-3 now. Let's see. I know I had a couple other games circled. Akron remains 6-0 in the MAC, defeats Buffalo 90-58. Uh, Again, need wins like this in the MAC. Bradley once again defeats Belmont 89-77. Bradley is now 8-1 in the Missouri Valley. I believe their only loss in the conference was to Drake at home. And aside from that, they've been really, really good. So again, it's down to I think between Drake and whatchamacallit, yeah, Drake and Bradley, I think it is really coming down to. So, but again, we shall see what ends up happening um, down the stretch. But I'm really liking the way this Bradley team is playing. So yeah, I mean, I really like the fact that a lot of conferences like the Missouri Valley, like the Atlantic 10, are really coming down. I mean, the Horizon League as well. Cleveland State's 8-1, Purdue Fort Wayne 7-2. But yeah, I mean Bradley's 8-1. They are 1.5 games ahead of Drake for the Missouri Valley. New Mexico is, despite Utah State being ranked earlier, they're no longer ranked because they lost to UNLV. They end up a game back against New Mexico, who's 8-1 this year. New Mexico again under Richard Pitino. They made the tournament last year. They have a bit of fire now. 16-4 overall, 8-1 in the conference. This New Mexico team is interesting to watch. But again, I think right now I think the Mountain West gets 3 teams in to the tournament. San Diego State's fallen off quite a bit. And I think the other bit is between it's probably Boise State if I had to pick, but Colorado State's 5-2 in the conference, but they're only 11-7. So it's between 2 or 3 bids for the Mountain West this year. But we shall see. It also depends on, what happens the rest of the way in conference season. Um, Arizona is 6-1 in the Big 12 now. They defeated Oklahoma State 92-78. Caleb Love finally, I think, is really, starting to come back into his own. 27 points. And then a couple of really, really funny results for me. Minnesota defeating Iowa on the road. Minnesota now 2-6 in the Big Ten. They beat Michigan, and now they beat Iowa. Fran McCaffrey is another coach I will be talking about pretty soon. Um, yeah, I mean, Iowa tried one of those like fierce comebacks, but they were just down by way too much in order for the comeback to work. And then Wake Forest was in a dogfight a lot of the way through North Carolina. But yeah, they end up losing. Yeah, Wake Forest beats North Carolina 67-66, even though North Carolina hit a three at the buzzer, so it like wasn't. Yeah, so it really like the score is closer than it actually was. But yeah, North Carolina for RJ Davis, Jalen Withers hit a three to really cut into the deficit. That was his only field goal of the game, though. Um, I mean, Elliot Cadeau at 14, but I will talk about this North Carolina team. I just don't think is very good. I don't. Um, and I'll talk about um, Hubert Davis here in a second. Creighton continues to play a lot better. They crushed DePaul on the road 73-49. Um, UNLV falls after defeating Utah State to Wyoming. And then BYU defeats Colorado 83-67. Again, Tad Boyle, another coach I will be talking about here in a second. But yeah, with that said, that's the main slate for yesterday, the games I wanted to talk about. And then Indiana plays Northwestern tonight. Indiana will lose this game because Northwestern, even it doesn't matter how good or bad they are, just Northwestern has their number. So Northwestern will win. I'm not saying that as a as like um, I hope, Mike Woodson gets fired or whatever. It's just a given against Northwestern for some reason. Houston is playing at home against Utah. I expect them to win that game. Kansas is at TCU. Florida is at South Carolina. St. John's needs to keep up in the Big East at 7-1. They need to beat Xavier. If not, they might be in trouble. Clemson, in order for them to stay afloat, they need to win games against teams like Syracuse, who are just so bad this year. So, yeah. Speaking of Drake, they're also in action tonight against Valpo, and then St. Louis is also in action tonight against LaSalle. 4-1 in the A10. They also need to keep up. Texas A&M and Ole Miss are playing tonight. That's another really big game in the SEC. Um, Nebraska's at home against USC. I mean, Nebraska's not been very good. I mean, they lost to Rutgers, and like I don't know about this Nebraska team anymore, man. They just aren't playing very well. Um, Chance for Arkansas to get their first conference win um, at home against Georgia. It'd be funny if Georgia ends up winning this game, though. And I will talk about John Calipari here in a moment. All right. So, with that being said, let's get into the coaching hot seat. Yes, the coaching hot seat. Um, what I've done is I have compiled a list into four separate categories. Uh, no, five separate categories. So it's kind of like a DEFCON 5, DEFCON 1 situation, DEFCON 5 being the least urgent, and then DEFCON 1 being the most. From the categories from least urgent to most urgent is too early to tell, gotta get going is DEFCON 4, maybe another year is DEFCON 3, heating up is DEFCON 2, and then almost guaranteed to be fired is is DEFCON 1. So again, I don't have every single coach on this. I mean, every single coach that's in danger on this list. So there are probably quite a few that I'm missing out on. But if you have any differences of opinions or a coach that you think is also on the hot seat that I should have mentioned, just email the pod, uh, crimsonmissouripod at gmail.com. So with that being said, let's start with the least urgent DEFCON 5, which is the too early to tell category. I only have two coaches on this list on the too early to tell, and that is Mark Madsen of California. I think overall, um, California's been playing better in his second season uh, of the Golden Bears, but I'm not completely sold on him yet. But again, it's not overall like we have to probably wait and see on Mark Madsen at least right now. Um, yeah, so nothing really too much else to say. I mean, former NBA player Mark Madsen, but yeah, I mean not yeah, 9-9 overall, 2-5 in the ACC. But again, I think that is a little too early to tell, at least right now. But again, in a weak ACC, probably need to perform a little better. I get that it's only year two, but yeah, right now too early to tell. And then I already mentioned St. Louis, but Josh Schertz of St. Louis University, too early to tell in his first year at the program. Um, yeah, I don't have a ton to say. But again, kind of a year that I thought St. Louis might take off in, especially after they got Robbie Avila from Indiana State, and that just hasn't happened. So again, too early to tell. And those are the only two I have on that in that category. So let's move on to the gotta get going. Like you have to get going pretty soon, or else your seat's going to be heating up even more. Um, yeah. So Rodney Terry at Texas. I know that Texas just won; they beat Missouri, but this is technically year three for Rodney Terry. Um, because he, filled in for Chris Beard after his domestic violence incident. Yeah, he was the interim head coach, and then he's now the head coach. And I know he made the Elite Eight the in year like the year he was an interim coach. He made the tournament last year, and this year's not going as well. Obviously, they can play better down the stretch, but Rodney Terry for Texas, you got to get going here at some point. So that's number one. And then Micah Shrewsbury for Notre Dame. I honestly pondered putting him higher on this list, and I probably should have put him higher on this list, to be honest. Um, he's only in year two. I get it, but they've played really poorly. So, like, that's also leading me to believe he may not be as good of a head coach as he really is. Like, I know he made the tournament at Penn State, um, but I just so far he's really not been as good. And I like Micro Shrewsbury, which is the problem. Like that's why I probably didn't put him as higher as a lot of people may have him. But yeah, I don't know. That's just not it's just not really going as well this year. Nor did it really go well last year either. 13-20 and 8-10 so far this year. So again, jury not completely kind of a hung jury on Micah Shrewsbury so far, but let's continue to be in the ACC. I have a lot of ACC coaches on here. Adrian Autry, still in the gotta get going category, but kind of the same place with Micah Shrewsbury. It's early enough to where it's like still give them another shot, but at the same time, especially as I've said in a weak ACC, um, just the results are not there, and that's leading me to believe that like okay, maybe there is a pretty big problem here with Syracuse. Not going well post Jim Bay Chimera, nor did it go well in the final couple years of the Jim Bay Chimera. So, um, yeah, I put Adrian Autry there as well. Um, this one's a bit of uh, I don't know. I pondered putting this guy here at all, but Penny Hardaway for Memphis, I think as long as Memphis like continues to play well this year and make the tournament, I think he's fine. But if they suffer a collapse like they did last year, he's really they're going to be questions about Penny Hardaway. So I just needed to put him there to begin with. Um, yeah, and then the final coach I have in the gotta get going category is Steve Alford of Nevada, former IU standout. The one of the main reasons why they won the '87 national title. Of course, you have the Keith Smart jumper to win that game, win the national title, but at the same time, um, Nevada has been really mediocre this year, and they're in a Mountain West conference that is in a bit of a down year. Um, they really just have not been playing well either. So I'm really starting to get convinced that maybe Steve Alford just isn't. I mean, he's had chances at New Mexico and UCLA, but it overall just has not been working out there at Nevada so far. And even though I'm pretty sure they made the tournament last year, um, but at the same time, it's this season's been a bit of a downer. So we shall see. And again, that's why I probably don't. I'm not putting him as highly as other coaches I have. So, DEFCON 3, maybe another year. So, I have five coaches in this yeah, five coaches in this category. So the first one I have is Tad Boyle of Colorado. I know he's had past success with the Buffaloes, but this season has been a disaster. So, yeah, Colorado, first year back in the Big 12 after spending, I think, the last how many years was it? Like 14, 15 years in the Pac-12. Yeah, they're 9-9, 0-7 in the Big 12. Not looking good. Obviously, I thought when they beat UConn in the Maui, that would be like a really big jump start for them. But they've played like ass since conference season began, and that's really been it's really been a downer. So Tad Boyle, 15 years at Colorado, um, maybe he gets another shot, but I could also see him in the heating up category. I don't know. I just maybe past success is a bit much. All right, okay. So the second coach that I have on this list, and I talked about this team already. That is Ben Johnson. No, not the recent Chicago Bears hire, but the Minnesota Golden Gophers head coach, Ben Johnson. They've won two in a row, but overall, it's just the experiment has not worked out for Minnesota. Um, so far at least. And again, he's only in year two. I get it, but at the same time, or no, fourth. Is it his fourth season? Okay, never mind. I got him confused with another coach on this list. But yeah, fourth season and still getting results like this. That's not really good. So yeah, Ben Johnson maybe another year, but yeah, but I could see him if it goes south. It could really be the end of Ben Johnson's tenure at Minnesota. This was the coach that I for some reason got mixed up in. It is Kim English at Providence. So Providence barely missed out on the tournament last year, which I don't know, should they have gotten in? Is still like, maybe not, but this year definitely not. They are 9-10, 3-5 in the Big East. After starting 5-0, it really started to go downhill in the battle for Atlantis, and then obviously you have the whole Bryce Hopkins thing, which like is he actually hurt? Does he not want to play? Um, I don't know. I was really sad about Bryce Hopkins just not being who like the player I thought he was going to be, and it's because I think with him this Providence team would be really good. So that's maybe why I give Kim English a little bit of leeway, but at the same time, the fall off is really bad, and so that's kind of why I put him in DEFCON 3, maybe another year. And then this coach I could easily put higher, like a guaranteed fire. But I don't know yet. Maybe I do, but I have Shaheen Holloway at Seton Hall in his third season. Seton Hall is 6-13. That's bad. 1-7 in the Big East. So I've talked about this team ad nauseum. I talked about how they were like unable to score 60 or more points at the beginning of the season. And just looking at it, yeah, they did not score 60 or more points in their first four games this year. This team's not very good. And you know, maybe I don't know what is to be done. And it could be very easily the point that could be made that he might be fired after this season, and that might be it. But right now, maybe he gets another shot. I don't know. Like, what can Seton Hall of all schools do better currently? I don't know, but that is still up for debate, I suppose. Yeah, and then the final coach that I have um, in this particular category is Steve Peichel of Rutgers. Yeah, especially after losing to Penn State, now 10-9 with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, two potential like top 10, top 5 draft picks. Like that's that's a reason why people should be like, oh, okay, maybe you need to go. So I don't know, man. Steve Peichel's had a really good track record at a school like Rutgers. He's always had them competitive, but especially these last 2 years. I mean, last year was a disappointment. The year before, it was an IT, and this year is also looking like the same case. So yeah, I don't if it continues to go this way, Steve Peichel might be on his way out. But again, there's always a chance for a turnaround. But if you can't make the tournament with guys like Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, you are asking to be fired. Like that's not really great. So yeah, yeah, that definitely sucks. For Steve Peichel. I'm so heartbroken, by the way, if you can tell in the tone of my voice. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of Rutgers or Steve Peichel. All right, so this is a gigantic category, heating up, heating up. DEFCON 2, like you are that close to being fired, but like aren't 100% guaranteed. I have a lot of coaches in this list. So I'm not gonna like say too much about each because I want to run through this kind of quickly, but I also want to give my reasoning for why they're in this category and not in the 100%. So the first coach I have on this list is Anthony Grant of Dayton. Again, I know Dayton's a very talented team, but the way they've been playing in the A10 as of late has just been. I know they've won, I think, their last two games, but at the same time, this is a Dayton team that is way more talented than their record shows, and if they aren't able to make improvements, then it kind of falls on the head coach. And so that's that's kind of why I have Anthony Grant up here. And he's had time to turn this around, and he's had some really good years at Dayton. Don't get me wrong, but um, yeah, I'm just not. This year's kind of really been not good for Dayton, and so this could be this could be spelling doom for a guy like Anthony Grant. But he's not 100% because there's always that shot of a turnaround. So next coach I have in here is Kyle Neptune of Villanova. When you have a guy like Eric Dixon and you're in a conference like the Big East, you should probably be a lot better than how Villanova's been this year. Again, it hasn't been horrible, but Kyle Neptune overall has had a lot of heat on him, and so I think, with that being said, it's like Villanova has been playing slightly better by the time conference plays come around, but at the same time, um, they've also lost three out of their last four games. So yeah, that's why Kyle Neptune is up here in his third season. The post Jay Wright era has been not good, and I don't think it all falls on Kyle Neptune's shoulders, but Jay Wright really had that program in such a good spot. Um, so that's why Kyle Neptune is in a bit of trouble here, I think. So this one is really interesting. So Fran McCaffrey at Iowa, his seats, in my opinion, is heating up. And will Iowa fire him? I don't know. How much better do you get than Fran McCaffrey at a school like Iowa? I don't know, is the answer to that.
But the things I do know are that Fran McCaffrey has never made a Sweet 16. Uh, I don't know if he's made the Sweet 16 as a head coach overall or if this is just at Iowa. But at the same time, that record of his is very much to be desired. So yeah, he's never made it past the first weekend in the NCAA tournament. Last year made the NIT. This year he's had a I mean he has talent on this team, but his philosophy of all offense, almost no defense has just been really, really it's kind of the antithesis of Kirk Ferentz at the football program, where it's all defense, no offense, but at the same time, for Fran McCaffrey, he's had more talent in the past than he's had this season, and he's really failed to do much with those guys. Every year, it's just been disappointment after disappointment for Iowa. Whether it's flaming out in the Big Ten regular season or flaming out early in the NCAA tournament. He did it uh, twice in 2 years, in fact, where he had Luca Garza and lost to Oregon in the round of 32, and then lost to Richmond in the tournament after that in the first round. So it's like, yeah, Fran McCaffrey is definitely, if this continues to go downhill, Fran McCaffrey's seat might be starting to catch fire here. And I don't, that's why I'm not putting him at 100% is just because I don't know if Iowa would do that, but that is a question that needs to be brought up to a lot of Iowa fans, Iowa players, Iowa coaches, potential, and especially the administration. So we shall see on that one. Um, Next coach I have here is Mike Young of Virginia Tech. I just have not been that impressed with Mike Young. I don't know exactly what you can do differently um, at Virginia Tech at the moment because I understand it's very tough to gauge how good a coach is in this current situation. But he's made the NIT the last 2 years, and this year's going way worse. So it's really heating up for Mike Young, I think. There's a shot he turns it around, but I don't know for certain. He's on the verge of 400 career wins, though, so hope he gets that at least. I just again like with Iowa, I just don't know how much better you can do at a school like Virginia Tech, but then again, I've been wrong before. So next coach on my list is Jerome Tang of Kansas State. I'm just gonna say this: when you have a guy like Coleman Hawkins and you have Doug McDaniel on your team, and you've had talent before and you've had success, and then you have this season where it's going really, really poorly. That just spells a lot of question marks for you as a head coach. And so, yeah, Jerome Tang, I'm not sure about current in this current moment, but yeah, we shall see. And then, I mean, Mike Woodson, I've already talked about quite a bit. If this season just goes south, then I think Woodson's gone. But you know, if he rallies the troops and actually finishes the year strong, I think he gets, I think he has a good shot to stay, but it depends on how the rest of the season goes. But I'm still like, I'm not entirely convinced he's the answer for Indiana. So again, I've talked about him many times before. So Earl Grant of Boston College. Again, I don't know what Boston College can do much differently. They haven't been good for seemingly forever. I know they made the NIT last year, but he's 9-10, 1-7 this year in his fourth season. So yeah, I mean, it might be time to pull the plug and go a different direction. What the direction that is, I'm not sure, but it just seemingly Boston College uh, can never find any sort of footing. So, last two guys on the heating up category, I have Hubert Davis, who a lot of people have compared to Mike Davis at Indiana after the Bob Knight era came to a very, very chaotic ending. Made the national championship game, but really didn't have much success. And a lot of people have drawn comparisons. I mean, Hubert Davis made the national championship game and then really hasn't had much success since then. I know he made, had the one seed last season and um uh but made the Sweet 16, but this season's really hasn't been going that well. I mean, the season before last, I mean, didn't even make any postseason tournament after being number one to start the season. So Hubert Davis this season especially is currently 12-8 at North Carolina, 5-3 in the ACC, back-to-back losses to Stanford and at Wake Forest. And I'm just not entirely sure he survives this if it continues to go downhill. Um, they could. They have talent on this team, a lot of talent on this team actually. But well, if they don't do well, a lot of that falls on the head coach. And so he's not 100% guaranteed to get fired, but Hubert Davis is definitely up there with a lot of these guys on the list. And the last one, especially, being John Calipari. He's not 100% guaranteed to get fired, but Jesus Christ, he's been so bad this year. Arkansas has really, again, he does not, they do not have a conference win yet this season. That's a problem. And with a lot of talent too from the Kentucky transfers that he's brought in, like Adufiro, Big Z's, Zvonimir Ivisic, who I've already talked about being very, very soft, DJ Wagner, and then other guys like Carter Knox, who is that part of that like overtime elite thing, Janelle Davis from Florida Atlantic, Boogie Flan, one of the better freshmen in recruiting this year, Jonas Adu from Tennessee. Like he has so much talent on this team and started off 16th in the country and it's gone like completely off the rails almost. Like it's been really bad. Again, Arkansas has chances to rebound, especially against teams like Georgia and Oklahoma. But if they don't win those games, then I don't see many wins in this current state. Like, yes, John Calipari, we all know he's a great recruiter, but the better years of John Calipari are well behind him. And for that, I say good because I've always hated John Calipari, and I'm glad this is people are finally starting to see like, oh yeah, John Calipari really just not a good head coach anymore. Um, and I think at one point he was a good coach, but also I say that and he had guys like Anthony Davis and Carl Anthony Towns and DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall and Brandon Knight and Tyler Hero and Jamal Murray, Malik Monk, um, De'Aaron Fox, like all these Devin Booker. Um, yeah, like you just like list all of these fantastic players who are in the NBA, and it's like, oh well, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, another one. You just like you look at that and you're like, oh man, he had so much talent, but he's only won one national title at Kentucky, one national title overall, and that's not even including guys like Marcus Camby and Derrick Rose. Um, yeah, so I just don't quite know how you survive this if you're John Calipari. There's a shot, but at the same time, it's really been it's just like a disaster overall for John Calipari. All right. So with that said, we have the final category, which is DEFCON 1, um, almost guaranteed. And I say almost guaranteed, meaning like pretty much guaranteed, but like there's like a 1% chance that this person remains at their school. So I think the obvious one is Doug Gottlieb. I think we can all agree on that. Um, if Doug Gottlieb somehow survives this absolute disaster at Green Bay, I will I will be absolutely dumbfounded. Like I would not know. I don't again, I don't know why he's even here to begin with. This is one of the worst hires I've ever seen. And the year that Doug Gottlieb has just been like almost historically awful. 2-18 overall, 0-9 in the Horizon League. Oh my God, man. 15 losses in a row. Jeez. Jeez. I mean, maybe he gets a couple conference wins to get his record a little bit better, but man, this has been so bad. This has been such a bad hire. And like everyone and their mother is being like, "Oh yeah, Doug Gottlieb sucks." Not only as a coach, but as a person and as a commentator. It's just like all around just absolute lol cow. Just oh my God. Yeah. I've already talked at length about Doug Gottlieb, but just continues. Also, at one point, tweeted out something like some sarcastic remark about a women's college basketball game while he's a head coach, by the way. And then I think the same day ended up losing. It was either to Youngstown State or I forget who they played. Robert Morris, one of those two schools. Um, yeah, just an absolute disaster. What a terrible hire. I can't stress this enough. Green Bay, what the hell were you thinking? So yeah, almost guaranteed. If there was somehow if somehow Doug Gottlieb stayed at Green Bay next year, I there would be just no there would just be no sense in the world. And there already is no sense in the world, right? Trump is president yet again. So who really cares anymore about anything? So next guy I have, this is a bit of a controversial one. I think there's a I could have put him in the heating up category, but he's also one of the longest tenured coaches on this list that also um yeah, Bobby Hurley at Arizona State. Dude has had seemingly forever to um to turn it around. And I know he made the tournament a couple seasons ago. Excuse me. Um, that was a sneeze. But only three NCAA tournament appearances since he's been at Arizona, and this year really is not going that well. 2-5 overall. I know he just beat West Virginia, but I don't know. I mean, I am convinced that if it continues to go south, that he's getting the boot. Just because he's been tenured so long at Arizona State and just nothing really to show for it, aside from a couple NCAA tournament appearances that he also really didn't do much with. So that's why I have Bobby Hurley in the almost guaranteed category because I just don't see him surviving this year if it continues to go like this. Um, yeah. So then the last coach on my list is a team I've already talked about, a team that UConn had barely beat. That would be Thad Matta of Butler. I he's again kind of like with John Calipari. It's just like I really don't I really don't understand the thought process behind hiring a guy like Thad Matta uh, in his third year, but I know he's also had some health issues. He's only 57. He seems a lot older than that. But yeah, 8-11, 1-7 overall in the Big East. Um, yeah, I don't really know what I mean. Butler is really a team that's just going nowhere. Um, I know they've played some competitive games, especially against UConn, but overall, just not convinced that he's the guy. So, season continues to go south like this. I think he's getting the boot. So, anyway, that is my list. I guess too early to tell. Um, Chris Holtman would also be on there, and it's he's only in his first year, so kind of difficult to tell. But DePaul has also been just a college that is just a wasteland for men's basketball. So yeah, that would be a guy I would add onto that category. So Chris Holtman also too early to tell. So with that said, that is my list. That is my tier list of coaches that are on the hot seat. Again, thank you all very much for listening. I think I will wrap it up here. Enjoy the college basketball slate tonight if you were watching it. Um, enjoy the NFL playoffs, the championship games this weekend, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.